I'll open at 1,000. I'll call that 1,000. Hey, you got any 8s? Shouldn't you be watching Board Games with Scott? Hi there, welcome to Board Games with Scott. This is a weekly show where I usually take a board game and explain it and lightly review it. This week I'm doing something a little different. I'm talking about a game accessory, and that is poker chips. Poker chips are a nice thing to replace paper money with in any game where you're dealing with lots of paper money. As you know, when you're dealing with paper money, like in Monopoly, it takes a while to count out, it's hard to deal with, and it's much more enjoyable if you could just do it with poker chips. It speeds up the counting process, makes it much easier to count what you've got. If you are playing a game where money is hidden, you'll need to come up with some way of keeping that stack hidden. But where it's open money, it's very easy to see what money other people have. They're much more satisfying to handle and easier to deal with. Now, I went on a bit of a quest when I started getting into a series of train games that all start with 18. They're known as the 18XX series of games, because in those games, while they do come with paper money, it's much nicer to play with poker chips. And, at that point, I had some little poker chips, and for game purposes, I bought some of these little cheap chips that have numbers on them, and kept these with me and would use them in games whenever I wanted to have something for money. But I wanted to pursue something a little nicer. So I began looking around, looking for deals, looking for bargains, Would find some sort of Christmas bargain, with a good deal on poker chips. And then, I'd see something else would come along and I'd say, hey, that looks kind of interesting. Let me take a look at that. But then I tried another type and I'm like, oh gosh, these are so slippery. I don't know if I like those at all. And it got a little out of hand, And so I started ordering sample kits and bought more and more. This was my final set, actually, through this whole pursuit, but these are, sad to say, all mine. So I decided to actually do an episode of Board Games with Scott about this exploration. I've gone through and ordered samples from many of the companies in order to make my decisions. I've learned quite a lot about the different chips and how they differ in feel and consistency and playability and some of the considerations I went into. And so a friend of mine, Don Dennis, suggested, you should do an episode about that since you've learned so much in making your choices. Maybe you could share that with the rest of us so that we don't all have to go down and use good old bicycle chips. It's a great place to start, but there are many places to go. Of course, the problem is if you don't watch out, you're going to get buried in the things. So that's what this week's episode is about. Hang on. There we go. That's what this week's episode is about. I'm going to start with the basic chips and move my way up until I get to what my choice was. Talk about why I did what I did and give you some pointers along the way. So with that, let's get started and open up some of these cases. Okay, the first type of chips I'm going to talk about are pure plastic chips. Now, I started my chip world with these guys. These are mini poker chips with denominations. They're very small. They're made of pure plastic. They're not something you'd want to use seriously. But I got this little fishing tackle box. I put these little chips in here, and I can throw this in my game bag with me. And I have a reasonable replacement for money, or if we run out of money, I can just grab this. We've got something to go forward with. They're not bad. They still kind of a pain to deal with, but I find them actually to be better than paper money, and they're also easily concealable. So if it's a game where secret bids, these can work quite well to hide those bids. So even though I've gone and invested on all these fancy poker chips, these little guys are cheap. You can find them online. They're called mini poker chips. They have little values on them. They're very handy. Now, the typical poker chip that you might be used to are these. These are the bicycle chips. There are also a number of knockoffs of these. These are the standard poker chip size that you're used to, but they're very, very light. These say bicycle on them. They don't always, if they're cheap. They're made of plastic. They're easy to break, as you can see, like that. I can't wait to play poker with you. I'll break your chips. I guess that's $250 then, huh? Okay. So these stack, which is good. They stack up. If you push them too much, they might fall over. But you can't really tell very easily because they stack so thinly how many chips there are in a set. These are a good starter chip, something you can have around the house, but Not something to use for long if you're going to get serious about having some nice chips, but kind of a standard that we've all dealt with. Now another type of pure plastic chip, and these are the chips that actually came with one of my sets. These are our 7.5 gram plastic chips. Now these look a bit like chips you may have seen, the nicer chips, but they are made of pure plastic. They're very light. They stick together fairly well. Maybe not too well. One of the things, by the way, you'll notice that I talk about is how well the chips stick together. I learned as I began dealing with these chips that the better that chips stick together in a stack, the easier it is to deal with them in a game. Because the more time you have to spend trying to get them all stacked up, the more fiddling time you have in a game, and the easier it is to knock them over and they go everywhere. And I found actually the stickability ended up being a pretty significant factor in my purchase. Because having fondled a whole bunch of these different chips, I realized that I really liked ones that would stick together in a big stack that I wouldn't have a problem with. Now these, because of their interlocking ridges, actually do a pretty good job with that. They could take a while to get stacked up, but once you get them stacked up and interlocked in their ridges, they're not going to go anywhere very easily. These don't have the ridges, and well, as you can see, they kind of go everywhere fairly easily. So those are the plastic chips. Now stepping up a bit in plastic chips, the next kind we're going to talk about are diamond chips. Now for a very long time, these were the primary chips I used. They're called diamond chips because they typically have a row of diamonds around the outside. They are more heavy duty and thicker, kind of a nice standard thickness. They stack reasonably well because they have some bit of texture on the surface. And you can get these for really cheap. You can get them in many bright colors. I actually bought a bundle of these when I was at a game shop that was going out of business, and they had these at 75% off. So I got these in a lot of different colors. And these are what I used for a long time. But one of the problems with using these is they don't have any denominations on them. And what I was finding is that when I was using chips in games, it was nice to have denominations on the chips. Now, if you're using poker games, you may not want that because you may want the chips to represent different denominations. But for most of our games, most of the Euro games we play, we use basic standard money denominations. Now, what I ended up doing is I made this card. So I had a number of colors of these chips, and what I would do is when we would play, I would set up this card so that you would know what the value of each chip was that you had in front of you. And then I set out these cards and you could look and calculate things, and it worked okay. I really started getting serious about my chips when I started playing those train games, because I knew that you dealt with a lot of poker chips in those games, and the faster you could deal with money in the games, the faster the game went along. So these are known as the diamond chips. They're very inexpensive, and they're not a bad chip. But the best inexpensive chips that I've run across are known as faux clay chips. Fox clay, if you're not too good at the whole French thing. Faux clay chips or dice chips. Now, what these chips are is, the reason why they're called dice chips is because they typically have dice that run from 1 to 6 on the outside. They're very heavily textured, and this is what makes them feel and actually stack nicely like clay chips. As you see, they stack very nicely, they stack easily, they're easy to deal with, they're light, like clay chips are light, and they're cheap. You can get these very inexpensively. And if I were to want to build up a poker set for cheap, these would be the chips I would go with. Now, the disadvantage to these chips is you can't get values on them. Because of the surface, they won't take a sticker very well, and I haven't found a place that will stamp values on them. I should actually talk a bit about personalization as I'm going through the chips. One of the things that was important to me, I realized, is I wanted to get values on my chips. And while these little guys did have values on them, that was handy, but as you see, everything we've seen so far has not. One option you have on putting values on chips is to do something called hot stamping. Now with hot stamping, what you can do is order the chip from the company and tell them the value that you want printed on the chip, and then they stamp into the chips. And they can stamp both sides. These chips I happen to have aren't stamped on both sides. You can get them with different things stamped on each side. And hot stamping is an easy way to get a set of chips with values. Now these dice chips, as far as I could find, I couldn't find anywhere that would take these chips and hot stamp them. So my quest continued for chips that could have values on them. So moving up, I began to order sample kits from some of the online poker chip vendors. 5stardeals.com is a very popular one. They have a number of sample kits that you can get. And what I discovered is there is a ton of these 11.5 gram chips with metal inserts. These are the most common chips you'll see as the sort of the first nice set of chips. They have a nice feel to them. They have a heft to them because there's a small metal coin in the middle of each one, which you can actually hear the way the chips bang together. You can hear the little metal coin clang in the middle of it. And a lot of people don't like that. They don't like the sound of that metal coin clang. To compare that sound, listen to that, and then listen to the pure plastic chips. So you can really hear the ringing of those metal coins inside these 11.5 gram chips. Now they come in many different colors and slight differences in the way they're set up. Some are stamped with denominations, which again was something I was looking at. On others, another option you have is getting stickers. You can buy stickers which will go in the middle of a number of these poker chips. And that's something that the folks at Board Game Geek did for their tournament, is they bought some chips and put stickers in it. I'll talk a bit about the type of chips they got later. But these are, they're usually known by what's on the outside, whether these would be Texas Hold'em chips. These are pair of dice chips. You've got ace, king, queen. You've got these, but they're basically very similar. They're plastic with a metal coin on the inside. And the problem with these is they're slippery. There's just no friction between them. So, you deal with a big stack of them and they start slipping all over, and it gets frustrating to work with. And I found the slipperiness of chips, as you could see, the slipperiness of chips really got tiring to me, and that was something I began to look for. But this is really the generic chip that you're going to see a lot of places, 11.5 gram chip with a metal insert, the typical chip that you're going to see. Now there are a few atypical chips also that are advertised alongside of those. Some of the ones that start out like one of the chips we just looked at actually has a coin on the insert, and that's got basically that same metal coin, but now you can see it. A denomination can get stamped in it. They look very nice. You can get these in a number of colors, but again, they're very, very slippery, which I don't care for. Now these chips, and you'll see this Desert Sands, Nevada Jacks, these are also a plasticky chip. But as you can see, the way the graphic is put on, sometimes they'll call them casino chips because the graphics go all the way to the edge. And they're like another chip we'll take a look at later. But they are made of plastic. Now these have a texture on them. And the texture allows them to stick together much better. They have the edge spots, as you see. And these actually, you can get these customized. You can get these printed with whatever it is you'd like on them. And so this is one type of chip you can go with if you want to customize it. But these are a little better to deal with, in theory, because of the texture. I found I didn't really like the look of the print. I didn't like sort of this printed look. It didn't do it for me, so I decided not to go with this type of chip. Now there's another type of chip, and I've seen this one actually called a clay chip. It's not, it's a composite chip. It's got probably has a little bit of clay, some plastic. It's got the printing on it as compared to a label or a sticker or something like that. But they look very nice, and you'll see these. And this was actually the first set I purchased after my diamond chips. I saw a deal. It was a post-Christmas special on some chips, and so I decided to go with them. And they're these guys. And so these are that similar sort of clay chip. They came in a really nice case. I actually use the case for my best chips now. And it was branded off of this poker player. And so they look very nice. They've got denominations, which are important to me. The problem with these, and I didn't know this till I actually got them and began to mess with them, is they're slippery as snot. They're very hard to stack. They're hard to deal with. I actually brought them to some games and we found them very frustrating to try and even pull out a stack because they just slip everywhere. So they look nice, but they slip all around. They don't hold the stack very well. They're hard to deal with. Now what I ended up doing is I worked with a friend of mine, Don Dennis, who suggested, well, first I tried some spray-on varnish to try and give them a bit of a tack, and that didn't work. In fact, it just kind of made them feel yucky. But then he found some sand blocks that were like a sponge with a sandpaper on it. I tried normal sandpaper, and what I found is very quickly if I sanded it, this print would come off. So I took the sanding blocks and took the sanding block to each one of them, and that actually helped a lot. Before I took the sanding block to these, I couldn't pinch them together like this. They would fly everywhere. So I took the sanding box. That still added a little bit of texture, so it got the chips to a level that I can deal with. I like the fact that these chips, that even though they have edge spots, the edge spots are all white, so there's not going to be any confusion as to what color you've got. On some of these chips where you have multicolored edge spots, the edge spots are the colors of other chips in your stack. and that can get kind of confusing if there's a bunch of colored chips with purple and white and purple, and you're not sure what's what from the side. So this set of chips, this is sort of my secondary set of chips. I carry them with me, keep them in the car, and use them if I need them, but I really don't like how slippery they are. Now I'm going to talk about what has become sort of the creme de la creme of the 11.5 gram chips, and these are known as the NextGen chips. These are all type of the NextGen chips. They're all the same line of chips. The only real differences between them, other than the colors, are the edge spots. Like that's got 3 edge spots all of the same color. This has 4 edge spots of 2 different colors. This has 3 edge spots of 3 different colors. This one says River Poker Tour on the outside, and this one has different edge spots and little bees on the outside. All the other 3 say Las Vegas. And these are the top of the line 11.5 gram composite chips. They still have the coin inside, but they're made of a composite of clay and plastic. So they have a bit more feel of like the clay. These are also designed to take a sticker very well. There's a little depressed area in the middle. And this is the type of chip that the folks at Board Game Geek went with for their poker tournament. Again, you can buy these chips and then you can order stickers from other places, or even from some of the places where you buy the chips and put a sticker on the front and the back to give you values. They can also take a hot stamp if you prefer just to hot stamp them. So that's another option. So these are the NextGen chips. They have a good weight. Again, what I didn't like about them is I felt that they were a little slippery. The outside edges here are fairly well textured, and so that's what's causing them to grab. And what I found, I started messing around with stickers, is when I put stickers on them, they even got more slippery. And I knew I wanted values, and I liked the idea of customized stickers with, you know, a little Board Game with Scott guy on it or someone like that, but just found that I didn't want chips that were going to be slippery. So I almost went with these, but then decided to look around a bit more. Now, there's a few chips that have come out that look like what we've seen already, but are heavier. These are 13 and 14 gram chips. These are known as casino clay chips, although again, they're composite, a mixture, but they're much heavier than what we've been seeing. Because of that weight and their texture's a little rough, they stack together fairly well. These are even heavier. These are 14 grams, and again, because of the weight, you know, they just sort of fall and stack, which is nice. That's something I was looking for. These have a depressed center, so that again, they'll take a sticker very easily, or it could be stamped. These don't really have a depressed center. So this was actually another choice I almost went with, these casino chips. Now, one thing I didn't like about these is they only came in 5 colors, and I wanted a larger variety of colors, especially for using in board games as something to swap out for the currency in a game. So I ended up not going with these and looking elsewhere. Another type of chip that I came across that's neat but not really feasible are these guys. These are metal chips. I think these just look really impressive. They're brass with an inlay, a plastic inlay. They have the values on the chip. There's 10 years. There's one that's Las Vegas Centennial. They look fabulous. And again, this was a set I almost went with. They're not that expensive compared to where we're going. They're metal, so they sound like metal. They look cool. But again, the problem is they're slippery. And I was finding I was really not wanting slippery chips. These came out. These are the same weight. These Nevada Club chips, which also have metal in it. The metal's not sticking out as much as with these guys. So they're going to have the same sort of nice stacking because of the weight. They don't feel as slippery as these do because there's more coating on it. But again, you know, just the weight of them was something I didn't want to go for. So I decided to pass on these chips, but I was sorely tempted because they look so cool. We're now going to talk about clay chips. And so clay chips are kind of seen as the creme de la creme of the poker chip world. They are more expensive than what we've been seeing, but they can be much nicer to play with. Now, these chips, these are called ASM chips, and they have a little bit of brass filings in with the clay, so you end up with a very interesting chip. They will stack a little bit better, they'll handle a little bit better, they're going to be lighter. What I didn't like about them were the colors. I felt the colors were muted, and so I decided not to look into these chips further. But you can get these actually printed with what you'd like, or hot stamped, of course. You can get these customized with your values. This next type of chip I'm going to talk about is commonly known as a chip-co chip, and it's a ceramic chip. A lot of casinos are going with this type of chip. You can print all the way across. If you remember, we saw these composite ones earlier that were basically in this style of the chip-co chips. But the graphics are very clear. You can have these customized. but the edge spots, are basically printed on there just like everything else. They have a different sound, and they handle fairly well, again, because they're very heavily textured. I'm moving my fingers back and forth, and the chip stack is not really budging. And so now we're starting to get chips that handle a little bit better. They're also fairly expensive. We've at this point we are at 3 to 4 times the cost of these basic 11.5 gram chips for these guys. But these are known as Chipco chips. Again, you'll probably either like the look or don't like the look. I didn't care for the look, so I decided not to pursue these chips. Now, another company called buypokerchips.com, they have a sample kit you can get which has each of their lines of chips. Now, this chip they call the Neophyte, and this chip it's kind of a rubbery plastic. They say it's the closest you can get to clay, highest quality cheap chips out there. That's what they claim. They're kind of rubbery in feeling. They're very bright colored. I really didn't like the almost rubber feel. They didn't slide around. As you can see, that stack's not moving. But they feel kind of like rubber, really. Then they have some other lines. They have this line, which is very similar. Their Archetype, which is similar in appearance to the Chipco chips that we've been seeing. So again, if you like that look, then that's a chip you can look into. Then they have 2 clay lines. They have their modern clay chips and their in-play clay chips. Now these are the nicest ones, and these are very nice. The edges are softer. These edges are hard. They're both stacks stick together very well. They both have nice bright colors. You can really tell the difference between these two. These feel a little chalky. These feel kind of soft and worn in on the edges, but these are very expensive chips. So I decided not to go with this company simply because of the price. Another company in the clay chip business that's been known for a long time are Paulson chips. These are some Paulson chip samples. Again, these are clay chips. These are going to cost over $1 a chip. They have an inside label that's very slippery, but the outside is made of clay and textured, so they will stick to each other quite well. These stack well, they handle well, they're not very heavy, they're very bright and attractive chips, but they are going to be very expensive. So most of the chips that I have here, all except for these guys, which are this company's cheap chips, these are all over $1 a chip, what we've got here. So then finally we'll come to what I ended up going with. These are Turf Club chips. These are clay chips. They have rough edges, so they're not worn in, but they're also about half the price of these chips. I like these chips because they stuck well. I like the solid color edges. As you can see, these still have the stripes. Remember I was talking about the problem earlier that if you have too many edge stripes, it can be really hard to quickly discern what colors are in the stack. And one thing I wanted to have were chips that had a solid edge, because for replacement in-game currency, that's something that's handy to have, because it's much easier to identify what's in a stack when you're not trying to pick out, all right, is that a yellow one with a blue edge, or what's actually going on there? So I ended up going with these chips. I liked the colors. I liked the slightly different patterns around each edge. I liked the cowboy, as he reminds me of my years in Texas. He looks like Big Tex, who's there at the state fair. They are a little chalky in feeling, and they are a little rough in feeling, and I'm assuming that with time that'll go away. But they stack very well. They're easy to deal with. It's easy to pick up a big stack of them. And I think this is going to be a chip purchase that I can be happy with for a very, very long time. So this was my path towards chippage. One of the things to consider is the cost of these chips. For the price of one of these Paulson chips, or one of these really nice chips from buypokerchips.com, or a nice Chipco chip, you can get a couple of the cheaper clay chips, or a couple of these Neophyte chips, or 4 of these nicer 11.5 gram chips, or 5 of these NextGen chips, or a whole stack of these cheap 11.5 gram chips, or an even bigger stack of the diamond chips or the faux clay chips. So you've got to decide, given your budget, what you're going to look at. Again, these are these faux clay chips. These are a great value for your money. If you don't need to have the values on the chips, these are an excellent thing to consider. Whew. So there's my journey. I went through quite a lot in trying to figure out what chips I want to use. These are the 2 now that I tend to use most often. I use they're very slick, but the ones that I sanded down, these chips, these 11.5 gram chips that have denominations on them, and I got a wood case which came with some more cheap chips, and I keep this in my car so that if I ever want chips during the game, I can run it to my car and get them. They're pretty worn and beat up. I don't care if they get stuff spilled on them, etc. And I keep 300 of these of mixed denominations with me in my car for replacements in games. And then this set, my clay set, which is for nicer occasions. If I'm doing a day-long train game, or I'm planning to, be in a more controlled situation rather than just a chaotic game night, I'll bring these out. I really like the way these stack. These handle. They're very easy to deal with large stacks. If I try to do that with these, they'll slip out everywhere. Easy to see. I like the plain colors. They're good for games. And so this is the set I'm very happy with. It was expensive, but I figured, I'm going to invest in these once, and I'll be able to use them for a very long time. So after all my explorations, these are the two I stay with. I do like having the denominations on the chips for replacements in games. If you're actually playing poker, then the recommendations I'm giving you might be very different. But what I've said today really applies to replacement of currency within games. That's how I use these chips. And that's how you can use them when you're playing board games with Scott. So to see more episodes, more traditional episodes, or to see some links to poker chip review sites and other things I've mentioned throughout this broadcast, head over to boardgameswithscott.com. Next week I'll be back with a more normal Board Games with Scott episode, but hopefully this can help you at least avoid the storage problem of far too many poker chips around the house. Thank you very much, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.